We are here with season 2, episode 4, Believe in Believe with Trevon Sundiata Ferguson. And this episode is very special to my heart for personal reasons. And it just covers like a huge range
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
of topics.
We, um, like with a lot of our episodes, weren't planning on having it go this route, but it
Mm-hmm.
became way more beautiful, way more raw. And,
Yeah.
and that's all thanks to Trayvon, being willing to share some of his most vulnerable moments during his
Mm-hmm.
epilepsy journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do want to give a trigger warning that, Trayvon does talk about suicide ideality in a moment that he tried to take his own life. Thankfully, he is still here. And we talk about coping mechanisms, to work through those things. But there's also so much laughter in this episode,
Hmm.
which because he as he described, went from like a light bulb dimming out to now he's just this bright light.
Hmm.
And it's just such an amazing, and like you said, very vulnerable.
Yeah.
A lot of things that don't get talked about. And from what I hear in the male world, especially,
Hmm.
obviously I can't identify as a male. I don't know that experience, but like there is, we've just heard from more and more people with epilepsy that guys don't talk about this stuff. So it's just very I don't know. You come out of it feeling like you can do anything
Yeah.
because we talk about his rock bottom, and then we look at him now and it's like, oh my God,
Hmm.
like it's just so amazing.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I don't want to say all of us, but many of us epileptics deal with. And,
Yes.
when you walk into a room, that might be one of the, hardest things about epilepsy is, taking care of your
Yeah.
mental health. And
Yep.
it's a constant battle because, you know, epilepsy as a whole is depressing. Seizures make you depressed. And,
Mhm.
medication side effects are a constant battle. So,
Totally.
this is something that we definitely want to talk about a lot on here. And
Yeah.
Trayvon's story is kind of a beautiful way to show it.
Yeah. You put it so well. Totally. Truly. And there's two reasons we wanted to release this the day after Memorial Day, and one is because Trayvon is a combat vet.
Which is a huge part of his
And
story
yep,
on how he
yep.
has
So I'm not going to
epilepsy.
say anything
Yep.
more about it because I don't want to, tell his story before he can.
Hmm.
Um, and then the other reason is that tomorrow, May 31st, is my late cousin's Jimmy's birthday. And Jimmy had epilepsy, and seizures took over his life. And that is why he took his. And it's something I think about all the time. I miss him all the time. Um, and I didn't have epilepsy when Jim passed, but a few y no, it wasn't even a few years, it was 6 months after I was diagnosed with epilepsy, I completely understood his perspective and why he did what he did and why Trayvon is talking about this too, and all we wanna do in this episode and in this podcast is provide resources so that, you know, hopefully you don't get to that point, but if you do get to that point, know that you have a community, you have people. There are, and we might not live in the same city, like Lexi and I don't even live in the
Hmm.
same city, but there are people out there who want to help you, and you are not alone.
Yeah.
Um, and so, with that, we hope you enjoy this episode. Um, and we really want to thank our sponsors so much for putting these helping us put these important conversations out
Hmm.
there. So thank you, Neurelis and SK Life Science. We know you understand the importance of these conversations.
Yeah.
So here we go. Hope you guys enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to What the F. We are so pumped about our guest today. We have Trevon Sundiata Ferguson, who is a motivational speaker, an individual coach, and also security manager at Spartan, which is those Spartan races that you see people doing that you're like, I'm just like, how, why, I could never. But you've done a few yourself, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. So you're one of those people I'm like, how, why? I don't understand. But you are pretty badass in that. So Trayvon, welcome. We are so stoked to have you on and chat today. What we wanted to start with today was just your story because your story has a yeah, you're like, so like that makes sense. Um, but it just has so many layers to it. Like a lot of people's stories do, but I think acknowledging that you are a vet and talking about, how all of how your epilepsy unraveled and I can also relate to being diagnosed with epilepsy later in life as you were and just I don't know, we kind of just want to we just want to hear you talk, Trayvon.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, ladies, for having me on this morning. So let's kind of start at the beginning because I think making sure we lay out the foundation properly. So first and foremost, I was born in Trinidad and Tobago. So I was born down in the
Mhm.
Caribbean, and in December of '94, my mom and my dad decided, okay, I had finished high school, and I had just actually applied for Howard University, and so
Mm.
I arrived with my younger sister on December 18th, yeah, of '94. And the funny thing was, like about a week after I got here, I got my acceptance letter to Howard University, which was so cool, right? But even with a partial scholarship, my parents weren't in a position for me to afford Howard University at the time. And you're talking about what,
Mm.
16 plus grand a year. So I ended up foregoing going to Howard University, and I decided to go into the Army. Two reasons. One, I figured if I got a job, there was no way mom could tell me what to do. That was one. But then two, two, I saw that as a way to give back in terms of service for the country that allowed me to come here to create a whole new life, right? Because I knew if I could do
Wow.
certain things here, then there were certain people, like my grandmother back in Trinidad, that I could take care of, right?
Wow.
I went
That's
on to
beautiful.
serve 7 years in the Army. Um, I would venture to say that initially when I made the decision, it was a hard one. And there were times when I thought about, you know, cutting it short. But the truth
Sure.
is,
Mhm.
the opportunity to wear that uniform, the opportunity to fight for freedoms and rights, not just here in the United States, but all around the world, made me realize that this this desire to serve something bigger than myself was truly, truly like deeply rooted. And funny enough,
Hmm.
it came from my mom, right? It came from my mom. Like my mom was this
Yeah.
Mhm.
amazing woman, didn't have a college degree, but I remember when she passed and all the people that came to her funeral and what they wrote in the book that we had at the funeral parlor, it truly made me realize how much of a servant my mom was, and then how much
Mhm.
of her that I have in me, right? And
Mhm.
so, like I said, I did 7 years in the Army. And unfortunately, while on active duty, I was in it was a really, really bad accident. In that accident, I suffered knee injury, which I still deal with today, lower back injury,
Mm.
and the worst of all, a traumatic brain injury. That traumatic brain injury, even today, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, my right pupil has never closed back to to the original size, so it stayed dilated.
Wow.
And
Wow.
from that point onwards, it was just a series of trouble, basically, from a change in my emotional state, which I didn't even know
Mhm.
that could happen from a brain injury. I only recently found this out a
Yeah.
few years ago. Um, Constant headaches and migraines, nosebleeds
Oh
regularly, um,
God.
and then the worst started about 5.5 years ago. Seizures. I I was at work at a previous job. I remember I just wasn't feeling right. My head just, I don't know. I'd gotten so, and the painful thing about this is I had gotten so used to having headaches and migraines every day. Like it was just normal, right? But
Mhm.
something
Yeah.
felt off. It just didn't feel right. So I got to work and I told my manager, I was like, man, I don't feel right. And he was like, well, can you tough it out? I said, all right. And then next thing I know, I wake up, I'm in an ambulance heading to the emergency room, and they're telling me I had a seizure at work. And I'm like, what? So I'm in full on
What?
denial, right? I'm
Right.
like, there's
Right.
absolutely no way.
Yep.
Like, what? So
No.
that's impossible.
That's such a good example though too, not to cut you off,
Yeah,
but being asked, "Can you tough it out?"
right,
You
Yeah.
already were toughing it out every day with those migraines,
right,
but no one knew about it. You just did it because that's what we do,
right.
right?
Mhm.
And that's what we've been trained to do. That's the
Exactly.
right thing to do. And then,
Yep.
can you tough it out? And you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
And this is, I think it's just a huge moment right there,
Yeah.
too, just to kind of focus on there is no reason to tough it out unless I, you know, oh, did I take the word? Uh-oh.
Well,
Uh oh. What'd I do?
I think now when I look back at that situation, I would have handled it differently. Like I
Mhm.
probably,
Hmm.
well, if I knew then what I know now, I would have handled it because I mean, I really did not feel right. And the thing about it, I was in a warehouse operating heavy machinery,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
it was such a dangerous position to be in. And to think about it,
Totally.
the what I was told, because I don't remember what happened. What I was told
Yeah.
was I was moving one of the machines and it had some pallets with paint on it, like 5-gallon buckets of paint. And
Mhm.
I pulled up to one of the bays and I stopped it. I thankfully happened to stop it. And I looked over to one
Wow.
of my coworkers. I said, hey man, I don't feel right. And he was like, what's going on? And I walked over to him and just dropped and started having a seizure.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so in denial. And then a few days later, my lovely wife and I were having a not so pleasant conversation. She doesn't like me to tell that, but I have to. I mean, we were arguing. We were arguing about something.
Mhm.
I don't even remember what it was. And next thing I
Well, that's
know,
normal.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Husband and wives do that.
that's
Yeah.
couples do that. We
From
are.
what I hear,
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm
yeah.
not married, but
We do that.
from what
And next thing I know, I wake up and there's two paramedics in our living room, and she's in the corner over there crying, and I'm like, "What is going on?" So they told me
Yeah.
I had a second seizure, and that was about maybe a week and a half later. And then from that
Okay.
day onwards, it started coming multiple every single day, back to back to back to back. It was like
Okay.
it was a
So
nightmare. We
sorry,
were falling
Trayvon.
down this rabbit hole. Because we didn't know what was causing it, and unfortunately, all right, hold on, I got to be careful with this because I don't want this to turn into
Yeah.
a bashing session, but this is the reality. At the
Mhm.
time, my only medical source was the VA, right?
Mhm.
And going to them was, well, it was a nightmare. And they're giving us the runaround. And then finally, I went and saw a doctor outside of the VA, and
Mhm.
then they told me what was going on. So, what this
Yeah.
is happening, I'm unraveling. So I'm a
Mhm.
combat vet struggling with PTSD, struggling with
Oh,
nightmares, and then they put me on a medication where I start seeing stuff. And little by little, I start falling down. It's kind of like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. And this person you see right here was slowly disappearing. It's kind of like a light bulb just slowly
yeah.
fading out. It goes
Yep.
from bright white to
Totally.
that dull yellow before it turns off. And I remember, I think the scare for me came when my wife actually said that. Like, I look like a light bulb that's fading out, about to go out.
Oh,
And
wow.
I remember it had gotten to a point where uh November of 2018, the day before my birthday, I had 10 seizures. I was at work,
Oh.
and then my wife
Oh,
had to come pick me up, and then it was like, and they would just like it. There just seemed to be no end in sight. And by that point, I'm on medication, so taking me to the emergency room. It just stabilized me,
Yep.
asked me if I take my meds, charged
Right.
me
Here
$1,000, and then sent me on my merry way,
Yep.
right? So
Here's a Band-Aid
Yep.
and go home.
right.
Yep.
So there was
Yep.
no reason for me to go to the emergency room. And I'll be honest with you, at that point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like
Yep.
the amount of
Yeah.
pain I was in just from having one seizure, much less having multiple back to back to back to back. And I'm talking about violent seizures. And now I didn't really understand
Yeah.
until I had to ask my poor wife to record me having a seizure so we could send this to the VA.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
then I had to ask her, like, how are you doing this? Like I'm watching myself on the video and I'm asking, how are you doing this? Like
Mhm.
how is it possible that, because it's hard enough that the first aid is so limited. There's not much you can do except make the person safe. And then you're
Yeah.
having to do this back to back to back. And then the other thing was, for some reason, I stopped having as many seizures in the day and I started having a bunch of them at night.
Oh
So
my
then
God.
so now we're worried about SUDEP. And so now combat vet, PTSD, diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and now I don't even want to sleep because I'm
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
scared that if I go to sleep, I may never wake up again.
Can I can I ask you a question
Sure.
that just caught my I don't mean to interrupt your story at
No, no,
all,
no.
but what did you said you asked your wife, how do you deal with this? What did that conversation look like?
Well, it was a short conversation because she said, I'm your wife. Like, and even today, I always tease her because she always would tell me, she's not a caregiver. But I don't know. I think sometimes necessity breeds resolve that we often don't realize we have, right? So I asked her that question, and in a simple word, she just said, I'm your wife. Like the if you magnify that to most people might be simple. But when you really magnify that, that encompasses so
No, it's
much.
not
Like
simple.
that
Yeah.
truly says, okay, the vows that I took with you, I value those. And I'm going to fight to live those vows. Right.
I'm gonna cry,
Yeah.
Trayvon. This
Okay.
is well. The
Totally.
thing is,
She's a
too, is that
keeper.
we've seen so many couples where
Mhm.
like it's late onset epilepsy, and the couples get divorced. They don't
Yeah.
last, and so um, it's just so what you're saying basically is that we love this and we're and I think we were both like, don't cry, don't
Yeah.
cry. Like that's just beautiful that you were able to ask her
Right.
the vulnerable question,
Mhm.
and then her answer was like, because like I
Right.
got you.
Right.
That's amazing.
And and see, that's what you just said is part of what frustrates me today is that every
Mm.
individual going through what I went through doesn't always have that. Every
Mhm.
veteran
Yeah,
doesn't have a family that can or will stand. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're at the point where
totally.
they're so broken they don't know what else to do, which is why we now
Mhm.
have so many homeless veterans and all of this other stuff, which should never ever exist.
Yep,
But
agreed.
it gives me something to fight for, and so my bride and I we're fighting this. But and in full transparency, on the inside, I was I was going into a place where I really, really should not have gone because so when my wife and I, when we first started dating, about a year into our relationship, I had a really bad accident where I lost a few fingers and I mean it was bad. I
Mhm.
couldn't
Oh,
work for a while and I had physical therapy for over 2 years and all that. So my wife
oh wow.
had already
Yeah,
carried a heavy load in our relationship, caregiver, financial,
sure.
all that stuff. And now we get handed this gift. And
Mm.
I'm like, man, I'm tired of the fear I see in her eyes. I'm tired of the
Yeah.
worry on my kid's face. I'm tired of the financial hole that we're falling in because I couldn't work. can't drive. So now she has to be caregiver and financial provider.
Mm.
Right? And we all know men, our self-image, our self-worth is tied to our ability to earn, unfortunately. And so I'm sinking down in this rabbit hole. And I got to the point where I decided, well, the easiest thing to do is to remove me from the equation.
Yeah.
And I remember,
I think a lot of people with epilepsy feel that
Yeah.
way.
yeah,
They
and
feel like this is my brain trying to come up with a solution to a problem,
yeah,
and here's the answer.
but
And I'm very sorry that,
w-
we've talked about this in other episodes and we've
Yeah.
been there
you know
too,
what's
but we're
unfortunate
sorry
about
that you've
that?
been there.
None of the doctors except one ever had that conversation with me. Not one of them. It was just take this medication, take this medication, take this medication, take this medication, take this medication. None of them ever truly had a conversation to truly educate us of what was happening and why it was
Yeah.
Yeah.
happening and what to expect, right? And
Right.
so I get to this point where I'm like, man, I am done. I remember like getting the pills. I remember what the plan was. I remember going through a series of conversations with some important people, like my kids, and just kind of walking slowly down that road. Just, as I said, continuing to fade further and further away from that light. And the day that I was going to make that a reality, it's so funny. At that time, Pam had gone back to work, and I can't remember what she was doing, but I remember I was sitting at home, and a friend of ours called. To this day, I always thank him for that phone call. He called and he said he was getting ready to start this new business project, and he really wanted Pam, my wife, and I to be a part of that. That phone call
Wow.
saved my life because, like, I was sitting there, I had the bottle of pills and everything in my hand when he called, and
Wow.
right after that phone call, my son called. My son Josh said he called and he said, "Dad, I just wanted to call and tell you I love you," which was kind of weird because it was in the middle of the day and he should have been at school. And it reignited a sliver of hope that I could hold on to.
Sure.
So when Pam got home, I said, "Hey, babe, Jared, that's our friend that called. He's working on this business project. He wants us to be a part of it. Let's take a look at it." And at the time, what I didn't know was that that company had a supplement that was based for people doing the keto lifestyle. And he was like, "Hey, I don't know if this will work, but I heard that if you were to try this, it could help, give you some relief." And so he sent me some packets of the stuff, and I remember like I tried it that first evening. I tried some the next morning, and within like a few days, I noticed a couple of things. One, remember, I was living with headaches every day. Like there wasn't a break from just February of '96 till 2018. Every day, headaches, and some days migraines. So I mean, it became a part of
Oh
my routine,
God.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Yeah.
so so with that, I'm holding on to this little sliver of hope. And then Pam starts researching keto and she starts cooking intentionally. Um, because again, the medications, like I'm at this point, I'm on a cocktail of 5 different medicines, but I'm still having multiple
Oh
smoothies
God.
every
Yeah.
day,
Been there.
right?
Yep. Been there.
And then
Yeah. Yeah. We're like nodding because we're like, yeah, well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's the
y'all know the
routine.
song and dance they put us through, right?
That's right. Yeah.
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 And then somebody mentioned to us CBD. Now, I grew up in the Caribbean, uh, huge Rastafarian population, even in my own family. So the use of marijuana for medicinal stuff. Now, I'm talking about way beyond just smoking. Um, what I was used to, but I never realized, right? So I started trying some CBD, the vaping, but I wasn't into that. So the edibles.
Mm.
And then on February 5th of 2019, I well, let me back up. The week before, I had gone to the VA for an appointment. I was waiting so long for the appointment. I walked out to my car, had a seizure in the parking lot.
Mm.
Oh god.
So then at that point, I was like, I told Pam, I'm done. I'm not asking the VA for another thing. I'm done. I don't.
Mhm.
I went and visited motivational speaker, Mr. Zig Ziglar. I'm still in contact with his family. So I went to talk to his daughter, and her and his office assistant, Lori. They told me about a friend of theirs called Jim Gardner, who worked with this organization that helped people with like unique injuries. The name of the organization is called the Adaptive Training Foundation. February 5th,
Oh,
2019. I walked in there. And again, like I said, I don't ever try to turn things into religion and faith, but I do believe in my faith. I do believe it's a strong reason why I'm still here. And it just so happened that on that Tuesday, the 5th of February, Mr. Jim Gardner was at the facility. Even though he's a board member,
wow.
he's never and the funny thing is he's never there unless it's a Friday. He just happened to be there
Wow.
that Tuesday. So I walk in, I ask for
Yeah.
him, the young lady, and he spent the next 3 hours with me telling me about the program and telling me about the athletes and all of the stuff. And I remember there were two athletes I met, and you'll understand why I call them athletes here in a second. There were two athletes I met: Derek Ross, combat vet that got blown up in Afghanistan, and Keith
Wow.
Murphy, who, yes, he was a combat vet, but he lost his leg on a motorcycle accident when a young lady ran a stop sign and hit it on his motorcycle here.
Wow.
So this guy went
Mm.
and served his
Oh.
country, survived all of that, and came back home for
Uh,
some irresponsible person to almost kill him.
yeah.
And they were going
Jeez.
through the program at the time, and I talked to both of them. So I left that day. I came home. I told Pam about the program, and I applied because you have to apply to get it. So basically, it's a 9-week program where these people they remove doctors and they remove limitations and they remove everything that you've been told that you can't or shouldn't do, and then for 9 weeks they put you through it. But they put you through it with a specific goal in mind. So at the beginning, you
Okay.
have to set a goal for something that you want to do at the end, when that you've been told that you can't do, shouldn't do, or would never be able to do.
Love it.
So they
And what was your
basically
goal?
give you permission to live again, right? On your terms.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally.
So that was in February, but the next class didn't start till April. And when I tell you, ladies, I showed up to that gym every single day, Monday through Friday, just because I wanted to be in a place where not only I could see these amazing people, what they were doing, but I knew that if I could just be
Yes.
in an environment, I had more to
Yes.
hold on to than what was happening.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
Yes.
mean, poor Pam, she's
Yeah.
fighting and doing everything, but she could only do so much, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and like just being in a community.
right,
It's the
Mhm.
community effect that like I think goes underestimated
right.
all the time.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little I mean, this will be controversial, but like at least for me, it's sometimes it's hard to be around healthy people all the time. And it's nice to be around people who are,
Right.
not
Right.
experiencing even the same thing, but just like, are in it in some other way and are, kind of on your level.
I'm
And
gonna
I
say
think
something that
Trayvon,
some people won't like, but go ahead.
well, you even referred earlier to before we received this gift
Right.
Mhm.
of epilepsy,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think like that kind of perspective only comes to kind of piggyback off you, Lexi. Like that kind of perspective only comes from when you've been dealt real trauma.
Right.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes, yes, it can be hard to listen to someone, bitch about they
Yes.
can't find the right curtains.
You kind of
And
have to
you're
go,
like,
okay,
I'm
deep
going to
breath.
murder you
Yeah.
because, like, you don't get it. So,
Mhm.
yes. So, yeah, yeah. I'm with you
Well,
Mhm.
100%.
all right, think about this. Like some of the guys that I met were guys. I mean, these are guys are combat vet and all this stuff. And I remember, like, I would go up there and I would just kind of sit off to the side and watch what they were doing. I mean, some amazing. Like I'm talking about guys who are missing limbs and all doing stuff that people, able-bodied people, complain about every day, right? And I'm
Sure.
like,
Yep.
okay. And then I had a conversation with the CEO and the founder, David Vabora. He's a former NFL player who started this program after running into a vet in a wheelchair, and it's a really amazing story. But I had when I got accepted to the class, I had a conversation with him, and we joke about it now, but it was a hard conversation because let's just say I was pissed at him. It's kind of like, well, for one, I'm older than he is, and I'm like, well, I'm a grown man. You're not gonna just tell me whatever. Well, when I got accepted into the class, you guys, well, Lexi, you see this. I have a pretty decent social media presence. I'm fairly active,
Mhm.
and when
I know, I'm the worst
Go
social
follow
media
him.
person ever. Sorry.
it's all good,
Ah.
and
You
then
post the best stuff.
and when I got accepted to the program, he called me into a meeting. He said, "Hey, man, I need you to get off of social media for 9 weeks." I was like, "What the fuck?" Like I said it right. I'm like, "What?" Like, this grown
Straight
man gonna call me in here and tell me what to do with my social media? But
Right.
but here's the thing though. He gave me something that a lot of people in my life at the time didn't give. He gave me truth.
Mhm.
He looked at me and he said, "Hey man, in order for you to get the best out of this program," he's like, I get it. Like you want to give and you want to serve and you want to do all this, but for the next 9 weeks, you got to be what I call healthy selfish. Like you got to take care of you and put everything you have into this program. And then you can truly go out and give the world. That was part one. The second part was he told me I needed to go get counseling.
Mm.
Now that you talk about pissed. I was because again, nobody had talked to me about I've been diagnosed with PTSD and all that stuff, but nobody ever talked to me about counseling,
Wow.
right? And
Yeah.
Man.
and he
How does
and when he said that, so I was kind of pissed. I came. Well, I remember talking to Pam, and Pam was like, "See, Pam was pretty smart, so she didn't even hone in on the whole counseling thing. What she honed in on was the fact that she knew that I wanted to speak and encourage people to do all that. And she's like, well, hey, if you are going to be able to do what you truly want to do, then you might want to take his advice. Huh. All right, cool.
Okay, Pam.
You
Yeah.
know,
Wow.
and so I listened to that. And then I remember the first day, what was so cool is that there's this organization they're called One Tribe now, but at the time they were called 22 Kill. And that was because they were
Mhm.
founded in honor of 22 veterans that take their lives every day and they provide counseling for veterans
Wow.
and their families. And when I went to the program, uh, my counselor, Chris, was also really strong in his faith. So what made that work for me was that there were days where we would talk about the clinical things I needed, but we could also have some emotional and faith-based conversations about things I was
Wow.
struggling with, right? In
Yeah.
terms of my faith.
Totally.
Um, and
That's awesome to, like, to find someone
right,
that,
and
like, where you needed to
that's
intertwine
very
the 2.
rare
Yeah.
because a lot of times doctors are so guarded and rigid in their approach. There's not a holistic dynamic to the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is why
Right.
none of these
Yeah.
fools ever talk to me about the depression that comes with living with epilepsy until one
Mhm.
Mhm.
doctor I met, a doctor from India who was talking to me about this, and she said, "Has anybody ever talked to you about anxiety and depression?" I was like, "Well, I was diagnosed with
Mm.
it as a combat vet." She's like, "No, no, no, I'm talking about as it relates to your epilepsy."
Mhm.
Oh,
And
wow.
I said, "No," and she said, "You do realize that as dangerous as it is, depression when it comes to epilepsy is also like a safeguard, right? Because your brain releases all these chemicals to try to keep you in this slowed down state, even before or after an episode. I was like, nah, nobody ever talked to me about that. And then like she started talking to
Yeah.
me about how the brain is a computer. And when one of these neurons breaks or is affected, and the brain can't send message, it goes into survival mode, which is the off and on switch thing that happens in our brain. I'm like, why
Mhm.
had
Yeah.
nobody sat down and talked to me about this?
Right.
So when
Right.
she explained that, and then my counselor actually like we did a chart of the brain, of the components of the brain, and we were talking about the emotional and logical parts of the brain, how they can't work
Yep.
at the same time. So when we're emotional,
Yep.
we really don't see logic, which is why when we're emotional, sometimes we do some pretty stupid things, right?
Right. Yes.
And
No,
Mhm.
I've had the same conversation with my neuropsychologist
right,
who
Mhm.
my doctor recommended. She was like, "You need to see a neuropsychologist because, like, this is the stuff I can't do." And now we have appointments, and she'll be like, "Go take that to the other doctor because she'll help you with this part." She's like, "I wish I could. It's just not within my realm." And I'm like,
right,
"Thank you for acknowledging that, and giving me the resource." But totally, like, it's such a, it's such a weird state to be like, okay, I am functioning from my emotional side right now.
right,
And to
Mhm.
realize that and then be like, let me tap into rational over here and
Yeah.
go to rational. Yeah.
right.
Because and that, just like you, Trayvon, learning that was like a huge,
I know,
and I
right?
keep relearning it all the
But
time. It's like every day I'm like, oh, you have to fucking
but
remind
these are
myself
things
again.
that are
Like,
important to people's life that don't get discussed. Like,
yes,
think about this.
Mhm.
You're in
totally.
traffic, somebody cuts you off. So you're in an emotional state, and you respond emotionally, flip them the bird, whatever you do.
Yeah.
But then, you know, what to bring that back, if you're focused on, let's say, the colors that you're watching, now your brain has to switch to logic, and it can't think about the emotions because colors is just binary, ones and zeros that you see that form the pattern that make red what it is and make, you know what I mean? So the brain doesn't
Mhm.
operate
Totally.
in those
Yeah.
two spectrums. And
Right.
so all of these pieces are coming together now to form my what I call my safety net. And the final
Oh,
piece was
yeah.
meeting Reagan.
Oh,
The
Reagan.
final piece
Oh, our
Oh,
favorite.
was meeting Reagan.
yes.
So
Oh.
That dude is so great.
I'm this adult.
By the way, listeners, you'll be cued
Yes.
in a second. You're gonna figure out who Reagan is in just a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were doing this thing at the gym where they wanted to have uh, like a kids version of the adaptive program. We did a camp. I met Reagan. And I remember the week that I was working with him during that camp. Like this kid didn't have any fears. I mean, like he knows he lives with this condition. He knows people look at him funny. He knows his classmates. Some of them are mean. Some of them are idiots. Some of them, their parents are dumb and didn't teach them how to be nice to people. And yet,
Right.
the way this kid approaches anything he has to do is there is zero fear. I'm like, wait a minute. Like I got permission to do that too. I don't have to suffer
Yeah.
with this thing anymore.
Mm.
And then I'm doing this, and so I'm getting ready for the Spartan. And one of the trainers, again, all these things are lining up. One of the trainers, her fiance worked for Spartan, and they had some job openings for veterans. Remember, I hadn't worked in a couple of years at this point. I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm all right, cool. I called, I did the interview. They told me, well, yeah, this is the role they have. They asked me if I was okay with working at night. I'm like, yeah. That was perfect for me because I still didn't want to be. And see, that's the sad thing about this. Here was a
Yeah.
young man who wanted to be a speaker to encourage and inspire people that had decided he didn't want to be around people. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
that's how low I had got to the point where I was willing to walk away
Yeah.
from and give up on the dream I had. And
Mhm.
Mhm.
I get hired by Spark. So we complete the program. We go to Utah. We do some cool stuff up in the mountains in Utah at the National Ability Center.
No big
And then
deal. Yeah.
a few weeks later, well, about a month later, I start working for Spartan and I go to Seattle. I did my first, I remember, so, for those of you that don't know, Spartan is an obstacle race We have different distances: 5K, 10K, half marathon. We have an ultra, which is 30 miles, with a ton of
All
obstacles
insane.
along there. Yeah, they're all insane,
I'm
but they're
like,
fun.
"Ah." But that's the thing, they look like fun, I'm just like, I could
And
no,
I remember,
that's insane.
so, and again, one of my coworkers lived with epilepsy as well. So he's like, man, do it. We got you. There's medical staff all along the race. If you get into trouble, we'll have somebody
That's
to.
very cool.
So
Mhm.
at this point, this is the first time I've traveled away from my wife at all since we've been together. So
Wow.
I'm alone on this plane.
Wow.
I'm scared of now.
That was a
The
big
plane ride
deal.
was rough because I
Yeah.
got sick on the plane, like really sick. Um,
Oh.
yeah, I don't know. I still have a little issues with flying, but we'll
Mhm.
figure that out eventually. And so I flew to Seattle. That by this point, I'd gone now 6 months seizure free. Right?
Wow.
That's why I'm Atlanta, so
That's
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months
yeah, that's
seizure
when we
free.
met. She was 6 months, yep.
Yep, I was freaking out a little bit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's kinda like, "This is supposed to be amazing, but also, don't talk about it because I don't wanna
Jinx
jinx
it.
it."
Yeah, yeah,
I might be starting
Yeah.
to, like, kind of buy into this whole not having seizures for a little bit thing now, but
yeah.
I was still like, yeah, ugh.
And so I go up to Seattle, and I remember that I went and did the race, and so this was a 5K, 20 obstacles, went through it, and I remember crossing the finish line, and I just fell on the ground, and I was like just drenched, crying,
Mhm. I
and
believe
like
it,
the
yeah.
staff came around, and I'm covered in mud, crying, and from that point
Yeah.
onwards, I realized that like at this point, there's probably nothing that life can throw at me now that I can't handle, right?
Mhm.
And
I think we would both agree with that. So,
and
yeah.
Yes.
and then to kind of pull it full circle now, so since then, that was 2019. We're in 2023 now. So the last all coming up on 4 years, I've done a total of 36 Spartan races,
Wow. Oh
varying
my
That's
gosh.
varying
that is so
lengths,
cool.
va- uh, varying
Oh,
lengths,
varying
5K,
lengths. One of those lengths is cool. Like, I don't that's
10K, the
amazing. Sorry,
half
I'm cutting you
marathon
off.
one. No, you good. I've done some
You should
trails,
be
and then I've
that's
done some DECA.
people
So
still do
DECA
that. I don't know.
is not an obstacle. It's more of a Spartan fitness testing. It's kind of wild. Done a couple of those. Done a lot of hiking. I think since 2019, I've done maybe 300 5Ks.
Whoa. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. I've got a suitcase of
And
medals to prove it. It's just a bunch of because and then a
Wow,
couple years ago, I
Trayvon,
started
that's
this thing where I was doing this challenge to do 100 miles in a month to help with veteran suicide. So I do that every month now.
okay.
Um,
that's
and
so
that's
cool.
a
Wow.
combination of walking, running, and hiking. But right now I can't run because I'm dealing with some injuries. So I'm still walking, hiking. And so movement
Mm,
has become like the magical catalyst, right? For me. Uh, if I sit too long, now don't
totally.
get me wrong, I'll binge watch a good comedy any day and laugh. But
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
my wife will ask me if I sit around long enough, she's like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" You know what I mean? Because she knows
Uh-huh.
I'm usually out the door with a backpack, walking all over the place. I'm sure my neighbors think I'm crazy because
I'm the same way. No worries.
it doesn't even matter the weather. It can be raining. I have rain gear. I'll put it on and I'll go do what I got to do. But the reason that I
Mhm.
do that, there's a couple of things. And one, that's part of the healthy selfish. Like me. That's me
Yeah.
ensuring
I'm
that I
so glad
make
you brought
time
that back.
to take
Mhm.
Healthy, selfish.
to take care
Boom.
of me. Because if I don't take care of me, I can't be a good version of what I need to be for my wife. I can't be a good husband, a good
Yep.
father, none of that. Right? Yes, Trayvon, you live with epilepsy, but you don't suffer from epilepsy. And that's the difference. That's why it's a gift now.
Mm.
Because if I was never diagnosed with epilepsy, I wouldn't now be friends with guys who are former NFL players, major league ball players, some of the top athletes in this country. I wouldn't have a chance to, I probably wouldn't have pursued working with Spartan. The fact that I can walk into a restaurant, look around, and then walk up to the manager and say, hey, you need to have signage in here for seizure first aid. Like I get to do that. I get to be an
Mhm.
advocate of
Wow.
what's needed in our community, but I also get to be a voice of hope for those of us who, like me, had decided that life was over when I was diagnosed. Like
Yes.
I get to be a shining example of the fact that, man, yeah, I live with epilepsy and I can have a seizure any day, anytime, but I don't have to
Mhm.
suffer every single moment from it.
Mhm.
I don't.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because think
Mhm.
about this.
I mean, you definitely are a beacon, Trayvon. Like,
Well, thank
without a
you.
doubt, you're just a beacon.
I hope
Yes.
so, man. Because I
Well,
think God gave me a
you
second chance. I
are.
hope so. I hope so. I
Oh,
hope
You
yeah.
I'm doing the work I'm supposed to be doing because in any like life is a series of moments, right? It's from the first breath we cry, the last breath we take in. It's all moments that connects our dash, right? And if you think about
Yep.
this, remember when I was talking about how the emotional uh, and the logical part of our brains can't function. Well, it's the same thing.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
every moment, it's only just that moment. And the
Yep.
thing about choice that we were given above all animals is that in that moment, we get to decide who we are, what we are in any moment, right? Think about it. There's three of us on here. We all live with epilepsy, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
But in any moment, we get to choose, are we going to smile? Are we going to be mad? We get to choose if we're going to get up and go watch a movie or go take a walk. Like, but it's in the moments. Now, don't get me wrong. I have some
Yeah.
moments where I can be a real jackass, and I probably
Get
drive
Pam
poor
back in
Pam.
here. She
I
probably can
probably
remember.
drive
Yeah.
poor Pam and the kids crazy. But
Oh,
I think
man.
now I'm better able to, in the moment, choose to be a better version,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yes.
for example,
I totally understand that.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what the VA does at this point. Nothing they do will affect me on the level that it used to before. Like I'm not mad at them, nothing. Because with everything that life has thrown at us, Pam and I have figured out a way to make it through.
Mhm.
We've gone through repossession of the car, lost our apartments, and here we are. We
Mm.
own our house today. Now, are we free and clear yet? No, we're not there yet, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is, we we got to choose how we were going to do that. Anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
people. You know
Totally.
what people have asked me? I've had people ask me, why does Pam let me do all the stuff I do? I'm like, okay, let me show you this.
Oh, brother.
First of
Why?
all, I'm grown.
Yeah, why don't they ask you, like, where your leash and collar is? Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. I mean,
I'm grown. I'm a grown man. But
how do you even respond to that one?
but see what they miss is that when Pam was the caregiver, what I had to do was I had to earn her trust to show her that I would be responsible enough as her husband and value our relationship just enough to
Mm.
not do stupid things when I'm by myself. Like that's
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys don't understand, that requires trust. It requires, if
Mhm.
I'm driving like I do a lot, like I'll drive from Dallas to Seattle. That's 32 hours of driving. That when I tell her, hey babe, I'm gonna stop after 3 hours, take a 30-minute reset rest, and then go again, that I actually do that.
Mhm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yes.
Or call her when I'm resting, or let her know. I mean, even when I'm not feeling well, be honest enough to tell her, "Hey, babe, I'm not feeling my
Yeah.
best, but this is what I'm doing," so that she knows I'm not again that I'm not being a jackass and being irresponsible. You see what I'm
Yep.
saying? So now,
Yep.
Yeah.
now it's easier for her not to have to worry about me when I do what I'm doing. So she can trust that I'll do what I need to do to be safe. She can trust that when
Yeah.
I go do
Totally.
a Spartan race, If I go work a cycle and I'm not feeling well, and I tell her, I don't feel good, I'm not going to run this weekend. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like they
Yep.
miss
Yeah,
they miss the fact that as a couple, that trust it has to exist enough so that my wife doesn't have to worry herself into a state every single day when she's
totally.
not there.
Yep.
You know what I
I
mean?
Totally.
had to do the
Well,
same thing with my parents. They back when I was in college, they
Uh-huh.
were like, "No, we know she's out there, like you said, being a jackass. She's being a little selfish." And, and then, fast forward 12 years to now, and they know that they can trust me that I will take care of my body to the best of my ability.
Right.
And, they only need to step in when my body says, F you, we're
Right.
still going to act up.
Right.
But I
Mhm.
mean, you're so right. It takes an immense amount of trust. And a lot of us go through that period of, we just don't want to buy into the fact that we have to, live life differently.
Well, I also
And
wanna
especially for
just
you as an adult.
for the people out there who are like me, and, I was the only person to report to. I
Right.
have been
Hmm.
this since I've
Yeah.
been diagnosed 6 years ago. I it just for whatever reason, that's how it worked out, and so that's why I think I'm really leaning into, and I wrote it down, the healthy selfish,
I
because
love
there's
that.
so many things that I had to say no to, friends going, doing stuff, and like kind of like I had to rework my entire identity to my friends, and lost some along the way
Hmm.
because all of a sudden I could not do these things.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it just turned into, and now, like, learning to trust myself,
Right.
and learning to push myself out there when I needed to be pushed. And then when I
Absolutely.
found friends who could relate, like Lexi, just kind of sometimes she'll like be like, do you think that's a good idea? I'm like, that's probably, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
you know or sometimes it'll be the other way around. She'll be like, what if you did this? Then couldn't you? What if you took a nap? Couldn't you then go? So like it's just kind of having the right people around you, but
Hmm.
also really developing the self trust as well.
Yeah.
Because
So
not all of us have someone that's checking in.
I
We
love
can only
that
be
you
a
said
jackass
that.
to ourselves.
We
Hmm.
do, right? We do. But I love that you said that because you need both. You need my Pam, who's gonna, hey, are you okay? You doing this? All right, cool. But also, I also need her to give me a kick in the ass when I'm kind of lagging around and say, hey, now you can go do that. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
Right,
remember we were
totally.
talking about being around people who are able-bodied and healthy. So there's
Hmm.
two
Yeah.
sides to that coin. I don't hang around people who pity me. I don't hang
Hmm.
around people who feel sorry for themselves. I don't hang around. I don't have the energy to give to people who refuse to fight for anything.
Yep.
I just don't have it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I've watched again, and again, this is from watching my own wife, what she's gone through, just taking care of me, and then I see
Sure.
people who have it easy as hell, and all they do is complain. I just don't.
Yep.
Yep.
And but there's the other side to that where like I used to be mad at people and I would tell them, "Well, you don't know what I'm going through." But the truth is I really don't want them to know. I don't want
Mhm.
another human being to experience what it feels like to feel like every cell in your body is about to just blow up because you're in that
Hmm.
type of pain.
Yeah.
Where it feels like somebody stuck a stick of dynamite inside of your brain in a metal box that it can't get out and it's just exploding every second of the day. It,
Yep.
I I don't want anybody to feel what it feels like to be locked inside of a dark room screaming that you can't get out of. Right?
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
truth. I don't want people to
Yeah.
feel that. But then I have to bring myself to a certain place where I'm open, honest, and direct enough to give them the information they need to be able to
Yes.
deal with me the way I need them to deal with me. And that's where I think,
Exactly.
especially for those of us who live with
Totally.
epilepsy, where it's sometimes it's a hard line to toe because you don't want people hovering over you. Like
Yep.
I don't know how Pam does
Right.
it because she's the perfect amount of care and kick ass.
what a lot of what your messaging has been today about surrounding yourself with that family that you want and kind of, working
Mhm.
with the family you have, because you definitely have done that,
Right.
like with your wife and with, your kids, but like with also the people that you want to be your family, make them your
Mhm.
family.
I I really thank both of you for the courage to stand up and be voices in a community that needs to have voices. But I also want to thank y'all for reminding me of something the other day when I spoke to y'all that uh, when I was given this gift, I was also given a responsibility, right? And that responsibility includes to, because sometimes I get a little jaded. I'm like, is all this work really worth it? Like, who's listening? Who's it helping? Does
Yeah.
running all these races to create awareness, is it really helping? Is it even
Mhm.
mattering? But you guys reminded me that it does matter. You guys reminded me that it it's needed. You guys reminded me that I've been given this gift, but with that gift, I've been given a certain measure of power. Because to live what we live on a daily basis and still get up every day and keep fighting, that's powerful.
It's all good.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Okay, guys, thanks for listening. We just want to add on to Trayvon's episode and with some resources.
Mhm.
So, if you are struggling with suicidality, suicide ideation, there is a number you can call to talk to someone immediately. That number is 988. You can also check out their website at 988lifeline.org. This is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. You can also walk into an ER and say, "Hi, I'm having thoughts of suicide," and they will take care of you. There's always options. Call someone. Um, and
Yeah, just ask for help. I know it's not that simple, but just reach out to your community.
even though it seemed, yeah, absolutely. Any person that you have.
And that leads us into our fave of the week. We want to, make sure that if you're ever sitting there with someone wondering, how can I help them? Just ask. It's
Mhm.
as simple as that. And
Yeah,
if they say, I don't need help right now, then just make sure that they know you're always there.
totally. And that comes from Henry's Heroes, which
Mhm.
is a nonprofit founded by people, well, not founded by that, but it grew from that
Yeah.
because Henry was in grade school, had a seizure, and in at school, which, is not ideal. No one wants to see that. He came home very embarrassed. And at the end of the day, like his whole class showed up to his house being like, "What can we do? How can we help?" Which is such a moving story. And
Yeah.
so that's what turned into Henry's Heroes, where now you've got kids doing car washes. There's artwork being sold in honor of this foundation. And then this foundation just gives um, the proceeds or the donations to individuals, organizations, people who might need it. It's very much like where can we help? So
Mhm.
if you want to check out Henry's Heroes, it's henryheroesfoundation.org is the website. You can also find it on our website under our faves on whatthefpodcast.com. And then we've got our fan of the week, right?
Yes, this week we've got
Yes.
Stephanie.
Oh, yes. We got a DM from Stephanie to our Instagram. And she said, "I just listened to my first episode and want to say thank you so much for doing this. My daughter was diagnosed almost 6 years ago, and the past 4 months has become very uncontrolled. We were told last week they are doubtful she will outgrow it. Nothing has made me feel more understood and validated with my fears over the past 6 years that we've been on this journey than this podcast. I can't thank you enough for putting this out." Oh my God, Stephanie, we are so glad that you're getting something from this as a caretaker, and we will hope the goal is to keep going.
Yeah.
We've got plans. Doesn't stop with season 2 or 3 or 4. Right,
Mhm.
Lexi?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.